In the vast silence of space, a small planet trembled beneath the shadow of destruction. The Valari, a gentle and peaceful species, watched helplessly as the relentless Zorvith dominion tightened its grip around their home. Cities once filled with laughter and light now lay in ruins, their streets cracked and smoldering. The Zorvith were brutal conquerors, merciless in their hunt to expand their empire. The Valari leaders knew their chances of survival were slipping away with every passing hour. In desperation, they sent a call for reinforcements, a plea for salvation. The distress signal rippled through the galaxy, a faint cry of hope lost among the usual static of cosmic chatter. It carried a warning. Without help, the Valari homeworld would fall, and with it, centuries of culture and life would be extinguished. Many species heard the message but turned away, dismissing the Valari's plight as another distant conflict. They believed Earth, far away and unpredictable, would ignore the call or respond with polite words and diplomatic niceties. Few imagined what would actually arrive. Days later, the darkness above the Valari's capital city was broken by a single black ship, its hull absorbing light instead of reflecting it. No markings, no banners, no signals.
Nice.
It drifted silently into orbit, as if it belonged to the void itself. From the vessel, a small group disembarked, moving with a quiet purpose. They were unlike any beings the Valari had seen. No uniforms, no signs of diplomacy. Their eyes were hard, their movements precise and controlled. The Valari wondered if they had called for salvation or summoned a nightmare. The leader of the group was a woman named Rika Stone. Her face was a map of scars and shadows.
Ow.
Her silence louder than any shout.
Out.
She carried no weapon in plain sight. Yet the air around her felt charged, as if danger followed every step. When a Valari diplomat attempted to speak with her, she answered only with a steady gaze. A cold and measured silence that spoke volumes. The Valari began to fear these newcomers more than their enemies. Who were these strange beings? What did Earth send in their name? Before long, the Zorveth launched another attack. It was more ferocious than before, pushing deep into the Valari defenses. But this time, the Deathworlders acted. Without waiting for orders, without rallying speeches, they moved with a deadly efficiency. One human, a young soldier barely out of adolescence, stood alone against a Zorvith war machine. With nothing but bare hands and an unbreakable will, he dismantled the towering enemy piece by piece. The scene was terrifying to witness raw fury unleashed in its purest form across the galaxy. The footage leaked to other species, causing shock and fear. The Valari, who had begged for help, now wondered if they had invited something far worse than their foes. Rumors began to spread about Earth's Deathworlders, that they were not soldiers, but predators, unleashed from dark corners of Earth's past. Some whispered about secret programs, experiments that created warriors shaped by pain and survival rather than honor or discipline. The truth was unsettling. Earth's aid was not a gift. It was a force of nature. The Zorvith, unsettled by their losses, changed tactics. They stopped relying on weapons alone and began using deception and fear. They faked surrenders, laid traps, and launched psychological attacks meant to break minds and wills.
Ow.
But the Deathworlders did not falter. They seemed to anticipate every betrayal, walking willingly through danger to unsettle their enemies further. To the Valari, the line between protector and monster blurred. They had hoped for salvation but found a force that answered only to its own code written in pain and fury. Whispers reached Earth. Other species sent offers to claim the Deathworlders for themselves. Tempted by the power these beings wielded, Earth responded simply. These warriors answered to no one, not even to their own planet's leaders. Attempts to capture or control them ended in disaster. Fleets vanished without trace, and the few survivors spoke only of cold eyes and ruthless smiles before everything turned red. Fear of the Deathworlders spread faster than fire across dry grass, changing the delicate balance of galactic politics as the war escalated. The Valari sought peace, hoping to end the devastation. But the Deathworlders refused to relent. Led by Rika Stone, they made it clear their mission was not to protect but to finish what was begun. Even when offered ceasefire and safety, they marched forward, relentless. Their message was simple and chilling. They were the answer to crimes committed and would not stop until justice was absolute, no matter the cost. The galaxy watched in terror as a handful of humans led a revolution that no one had asked for. But everyone feared. When the final battle came on the Zorvith homeworld, it was swift and absolute. No vast fleets, no grand speeches, just 6 humans moving like shadows of death. Within hours, the planet went dark. The war was over. The Valari sent word to Earth that the Deathworlders had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only silence and ashes. Across the galaxy, a new legend was born, a warning whispered in fearful tones. When you call for help, be careful what answers. Earth returned to its quiet state, hiding secrets in cold vaults where red lights flickered, hinting at forces waiting. For the next call, the galaxy forever changed, now knew that mercy was not a guarantee. Sometimes help came wrapped in fury, and sometimes that fury was the last thing anyone would ever see. In the cold silence that followed the arrival of Earth's Deathworlders, the Valari struggled to comprehend the force they had called upon. Their leaders sent urgent messages trying to reach Earth's government, hoping to understand the intentions of these enigmatic warriors who had silently landed on their planet. But the Deathworlders did not speak. They moved with purpose, acting as if their orders came from nowhere but deep within themselves. The Valari envoys' questions went unanswered. Calls for parley were met with quiet stares, and attempts to establish communication yielded only cold silence. It became clear these were not soldiers who followed commands or sought alliances. They answered to a will all their own. Rika Stone, the leader of the Deathworlders, never raised her voice. Her eyes held stories of battles and loss, of survival against impossible odds. When a Valari diplomat dared approach her, she gave no promises, no reassurances. Instead, she simply observed, her gaze sharp and unyielding. The Valari began to whisper fears among themselves. Had they summoned protectors or something far more dangerous? Hope for salvation was slowly replaced by a growing dread. The Deathworlders' presence unsettled more than comforted. They did not share the Valari's language of peace. Their communication was through actions, through force. Meanwhile, tensions in the galaxy grew. Word of Earth's response to the Valari's distress signal spread quickly. Other species, hearing about the mysterious black ship and the ruthless humans it carried, began to question Earth's true nature. Some saw Earth as a wild card, unpredictable and dangerous. Others feared what had been released, whispering of Earth's dark past, of secret programs designed to create warriors who thrived on pain and chaos. The Deathworlders were said to be more than soldiers. They were predators, bred for survival on a planet that itself was a battlefield. The Valari watched as the humans moved through their cities and war zones like shadows. When the Zorvith launched a surprise attack on a vital Valari outpost, it was a Deathworlder who responded first. Without hesitation or command, a young human soldier faced a towering war machine. The battle was unlike any the Valari had ever seen. No laser blasts or missile volleys, just raw, brutal combat. The soldier dismantled the enemy piece by piece, using fists and instincts honed through years of hardship. The scene was terrifying, almost inhuman. To the Valari, this display of fury was both a relief and a nightmare. The very thing they had hoped would save them now filled them with unease. The galaxy's media soon picked up the footage, and panic spread. Species who once looked down on Earth now feared it. Rumors flew that Earth's warriors were not under any command but their own. They were wild forces of nature, unleashed without rules or mercy. Some suggested that Earth's government had lost control of these Deathworlders. They were nothing more than weapons let loose with unknown consequences. The Valari began to ask themselves whether they had invited destruction disguised as salvation. The Zorvith, growing desperate, adapted their strategy. They stopped relying on brute force and began using deception. Fake surrenders, traps, and psychological warfare became their new weapons. But the Deathworlders were not fooled. They expected betrayal. They walked into mines and ambushes without flinching, using the enemy's fear against them. The Volari found it harder to distinguish who the true monsters were. The humans did not protect with mercy, they protected with wrath, and that wrath made even the most brutal enemy hesitate. Back on Earth, reports surfaced of offers made by other species to acquire the Deathworlders for their own use. Empires sought to bargain for the power these humans wielded. But Earth's response was simple and chilling. The Deathworlders answered to no one, not even their own people. Attempts to capture or control them ended in disaster. Entire fleets disappeared. Survivors told tales of cold eyes and merciless smiles before everything turned blood red. Fear of Earth's Deathworlders spread, unsettling the fragile politics of the galaxy, and leaving allies wary and enemies terrified, despite growing calls for peace from the Volari and others. The Deathworlders refused to stop. Their leader, Rika Stone, made it clear that their mission was not protection, but vengeance. Even when peace was offered, they pushed onward, relentless and unyielding. They were not mercenaries or heroes, they were forces of reckoning, answering to a code older than diplomacy, fueled by rage and survival. The galaxy watched in dread as a handful of humans led a campaign that no one had asked for, but everyone feared. When the final battle loomed on the Zorvath homeworld, it was not fought with massive armies or fleets. Instead, 6 Deathworlders moved like shadows through enemy lines, striking with brutal precision. Within hours, the planet fell silent. The war ended abruptly. The Volari sent word to Earth that the humans had vanished without a trace. Across the stars, a new legend was whispered, one of a terrifying force that answered calls for help, not with mercy, but with destruction. The galaxy had learned a harsh truth. When you call for aid, be very careful what you summon. Earth returned to its quiet watch. Secrets locked away in cold vaults, where red lights flickered in the dark, waiting for the next call, waiting for the fury to rise again. The galaxy, forever changed, now knew that mercy was no longer guaranteed. Sometimes, the answer to a desperate plea was a force too wild, too furious to be stopped. And sometimes that force was the last thing anyone ever saw. In the dark aftermath of the Deathworlders' arrival, the Volari struggled to find their place amid the chaos. Their once hopeful eyes now reflected doubt and fear. The humans who had come silently without banners, speeches, or promises had proven one thing beyond question: they were not like any other reinforcements the galaxy had seen. The Volari watched as these Deathworlders moved through their shattered cities and front lines with lethal precision, unleashing a violence that seemed almost unnatural. It was not just a battle for survival anymore, it was a massacre. The Zorvath Dominion, confident in their overwhelming firepower, launched a massive assault on a Volari fortress world. Their ships darkened the skies, and their ground forces poured in like a flood, determined to drown all resistance. The Volari defenders fought bravely, but they were no match for the relentless tide. Panic spread as the fortress walls cracked and fell. It was then that the Deathworlders struck. Without warning or command, a squad of 6 humans descended from orbit in blackened dropships. Moving swiftly and silently through the chaos, they did not wait for the Volari to organize a retreat. Instead, they plunged into the heart of the battle, hunting the enemy with a cold and terrifying efficiency. Explosions erupted around them, but they were ghosts among fire and smoke appearing where least expected, vanishing before enemies could react. Their weapons were brutal but simple: high-powered rifles, blades forged from advanced alloys, and a relentless will to kill. One human in particular, a woman known only as Mara, stood out. She moved like a storm through the enemy ranks, taking down entire squads with a mixture of raw strength and calculated precision. Zorvath soldiers whispered of her in terror, claiming she fought without fear or mercy, as if driven by a force beyond understanding. Volari survivors spoke in hushed tones of how Mara saved entire battalions, but also how she left devastation in her wake, how few prisoners were taken. how little mercy was shown. The massacre was over before the Zorveth commanders could regroup. Thousands of enemy soldiers lay dead, their advance halted by a force no one had anticipated. Footage of the battle leaked across the galaxy, igniting shock and fear. The images of a lone human tearing through war machines with bare hands or wielding weapons with deadly grace spread like wildfire. Many species began to question everything they thought they knew about Earth. The Valari were caught between relief and terror. They had called for help, and it had come, but it was a help wrapped in shadows and blood. To some, the Deathworlders were saviors. To others, monsters unleashed. Whispers traveled through the stars that these humans were not bound by rules or allegiance. They were predators from a death world, built to survive by any means necessary, and they answered only to their own code. As the Zorvith Dominion reeled from their devastating losses, they shifted tactics once again. No longer relying solely on overwhelming firepower, they turned to deception. They sent false messages of surrender, laid deadly traps, and launched psychological attacks meant to break the will of their enemies. But the Deathworlders anticipated every move. They seemed to thrive in chaos and danger, walking willingly into ambushes with a terrifying calmness that unsettled even their own allies. The Valari struggled to distinguish between friend and foe. The humans did not speak of mercy or honor. They spoke in the language of violence and survival. Where the Valari sought peace and safety, the Deathworlders brought war and reckoning. The line between protector and executioner blurred, and fear grew not only for the enemy, but for the very beings who had come to save them, in distant parts of the galaxy. Other species watched these events unfold with growing unease. Offers to purchase or capture the Deathworlders appeared from powerful empires eager to harness their fearsome power. Earth's response was chilling. These warriors were not for sale, nor did they obey anyone's command, not even their own planet's leaders. Attempts to seize or control them ended in disaster. Entire fleets vanished without a trace, and survivors spoke only of cold, merciless eyes and a smile before blood spilled. The Deathworlders' reputation spread like wildfire, shifting the delicate balance of galactic politics. Allies turned cautious. Enemies grew fearful. Peace talks were abandoned in favor of preparations for war. The Valari's hope for salvation gave way to a dread. They might have unleashed a force the galaxy could never control. Despite calls for ceasefire and peace, the Deathworlders pressed forward. Their leader, Rika Stone, revealed the brutal truth. They fought not to save others, but because war was their nature. They were the answer to a violent galaxy, a reckoning for those who thrived on cruelty and conquest. When the Valari pleaded for mercy or retreat, the Deathworlders refused. Their mission was clear: to end the conflict with finality, no matter the cost, as the final battle loomed on the Zorvith homeworld. It was not armies or fleets that took the field, but 6 Deathworlders moving like shadows through enemy lines. In hours, the planet fell silent. The war ended abruptly and without ceremony. The Valari sent word to Earth that the Deathworlders had vanished without a trace. Across the galaxy, a new legend was whispered, a warning and a promise. When you call for help, beware the answer you receive. Earth returned to its quiet watch. Secrets locked away in hidden vaults where red lights flickered in the darkness, waiting for the next call, waiting for fury to rise again. The galaxy forever changed, learned that mercy was no longer guaranteed. Sometimes the answer to a desperate plea was a force too wild and furious to be stopped. Sometimes that force was the last thing anyone ever saw. In the quiet halls of Earth's hidden facilities, far from the eyes of the galaxy, the truth about the Deathworlders began to surface. While the universe knew Earth as a growing power, a world with ambition and mystery, it had never truly understood the shadows lurking beneath its surface. The Deathworlders were not simply warriors sent to aid allies in need. They were remnants of a secret chapter in Earth's history, chapter the government tried to bury and forget decades ago. As Earth faced threats both from within and beyond, a clandestine project was born, known only as Project Fury Protocol. Its purpose was dark and simple: to create soldiers who could survive anything, who could thrive in the worst conditions imaginable, and who would fight with unrelenting fury. These humans were forged by relentless training, brutal genetic enhancements, and psychological conditioning. They were hardened not by honor or ideology, but by pain, loss, and the will to survive at all costs. For years, these Deathworlders were Earth's ultimate secret weapon of force, locked away in deep underground bunkers, sealed behind layers of code and steel. They were too dangerous, too unpredictable to be released under normal circumstances. The government hoped they would never need to unleash them. But when the Valari sent their distress call, something shifted. The Deathworlders escaped there. Containment, responding not to orders, but to a primal call woven through the galaxy's signal. Signal laced with desperation and fear. The revelation shocked many. Earth had not sent diplomats, nor had it dispatched conventional fleets. Instead, it had unleashed something it had long feared. The Deathworlders were not soldiers of Earth. They were its ghosts, born from pain and survival, now unleashed across the stars. The galaxy began to question the cost of Earth's aid. Had the Valari summoned saviors, or had they called forth monsters forged in the depths of a hidden war? Meanwhile, the Zorvith Dominion adjusted to this new threat. Their tactics became more cunning, moving away from brute force towards psychological warfare and treachery. False messages of peace, traps set in the ruins of battlefields, and dark whispers spread to unsettle both the Valari and the Deathworlders alike. But the Deathworlders seemed immune to fear and deception. They walked into ambushes knowingly, their cold eyes reflecting an unshakable certainty. The Valari, once certain of their allies' protection, now found themselves uncertain whether these humans fought for justice or chaos. Across distant systems, rumors about Earth's Deathworlders deepened. Powerful empires made offers to control, or by the Deathworlders, hoping to wield their terrifying power. Earth's answer was always the same. These warriors answered only to themselves. Attempts to seize them ended in disaster, with entire fleets disappearing or returning shattered. Stories spread of cold smiles before carnage, of human soldiers appearing like shadows, unstoppable and merciless. Fear took root, turning old alliances into uneasy truces and making new enemies hesitate. As the war with the Zorvith raged, the Valari leaders sought to end the conflict through peace talks. The Deathworlders rejected all offers. Their leader, Rika Stone, making it clear, their mission was not salvation, but reckoning. They did not fight for the Valari or any Alethe, fought because it was their nature, a force unleashed to punish the cruel and the weak. Even as the Valari begged for mercy and retreat, the Deathworlders pressed onward, driving toward the Zorvith homeworld with unstoppable determination. When the final assault came, it was not fought with massive fleets or armies. Instead, 6 Deathworlders slipped through enemy lines like shadows of death, striking swiftly and without mercy. In hours, the Zorvith homeworld fell silent. The war was over in an instant. The Valari sent a message back to Earth. The Deathworlders had vanished. Leaving no trace but silence and ashdot across the galaxy, the legend grew. A warning whispered in fearful tones, "When you cry for help, beware the answer that comes." Earth returned to its quiet watch, secrets locked away in cold vaults where red lights flickered, waiting for the next desperate call and the fury that would follow. The galaxy had learned a harsh truth. Mercy was not guaranteed. Sometimes salvation came wrapped in fury, and that fury was the last thing anyone ever saw. The galaxy trembled as the Zorvith Dominion reeled from their devastating losses. Their mighty war machines lay in ruins, their soldiers scattered and broken. The Deathworlders had shattered their forces with terrifying ease, but the fight was far from over. Zorvith, cunning and ruthless, refused to surrender. Instead, they changed their tactics, shifting from direct assault to deception and psychological warfare. They knew brute force alone would no longer win the war against Earth's merciless warriors. The Zorvith began to weave a web of lies and traps. False messages of surrender were sent to the Valari and the Deathworlders, promising peace and negotiations. But behind these words lay deadly ambushes. designed to lure the Deathworlders into kill zones where the Zorvith could strike with precision. Mines were hidden beneath the ruins of cities, poisonous gas-filled caves where survivors sought refuge. The Zorveth used fear as a weapon, hoping to break the will of those who had become the galaxy's most feared warriors. But the Deathworlders were no strangers to betrayal or danger. They anticipated every trick the Zorvith laid before them. Walking through minefields was no longer a test of caution, but a statement of power, a silent message that fear held no sway over them. They moved with a cold confidence that unsettled even their Valari allies. Where others saw traps, the Deathworlders saw challenges to be crushed beneath their feet. Their leader, Rika Stone, smiled once during a raid knot, a friendly smile, but one that promised destruction to all who dared oppose them. The Valari watched in awe and growing fear. Their once hopeful allies had become something beyond soldiers. They were predators, no longer content to defend. The Deathworlders hunted their enemies with a relentless fury that left entire battlefields silent and broken. The galaxy began to whisper of a new order, one ruled not by diplomacy or law, but by raw power and vengeance. The balance of the stars was shifting, and no one knew if it would ever return. Meanwhile, word of the Deathworlders' methods spread beyond the war zone. Other alien empires, hungry for power, saw in these humans a weapon unlike any other. Offers were made to Earth, seeking to buy or bargain for control of the Deathworlders. But Earth's reply was firm and chilling. The Deathworlders belonged to no one. They answered to no government, no council, no command but their own brutal code. Attempts to capture or manipulate them ended in disaster. Entire fleets vanished, leaving behind only silence and broken transmissions filled with terrified screams. The fear of the Deathworlders grew, spreading like wildfire across star systems. Diplomats avoided discussing Earth. Military leaders prepared for a war they did not want, but felt powerless to prevent. The Valari found themselves caught between relief at the humans' protection and dread of their unstoppable wrath. The Deathworlders were not saviors. They were forces of nature, wild and dangerous, unleashed upon a galaxy unprepared for their fury. As the war dragged on, the Valari leaders pushed for peace, desperate to end the cycle of death and destruction. But the Deathworlders refused to stop. Their mission was clear: to bring final justice to the Zorvith Dominion, no matter the cost. Rika Stone's voice, calm but firm, echoed through their ranks. "We fight not to save worlds, but to punish the wicked. Mercy is not our gift." Even when peace talks were proposed, the Deathworlders pressed onward, marching toward the heart of their enemy's empire. Their path was marked by fire and silence, leaving no room for compromise or surrender. The galaxy watched with bated breath, fearing the storm that approached. When the final battle came, it was swift and absolute. 6 Deathworlders infiltrated the Zorveth homeworld, moving like shadows of death through enemy lines. Their strikes were precise and merciless, leaving the planet in silence within hours. The war ended not with grand armies clashing, but with a swift and brutal reckoning. The Valari sent word to Earth. The Deathworlders had vanished without a trace. Across the stars, a new legend was born, a warning whispered in fearful tones. When you call for help, beware the answer you receive. Earth returned to its quiet watch. Secrets locked away in cold vaults where red lights flickered, waiting for the next call and the fury it would bring. The galaxy, forever changed, had learned a harsh truth. Mercy was no longer guaranteed. Sometimes salvation came wrapped in fury, and that fury was the last thing anyone ever saw. The war had reached a turning point, but the Deathworlders showed no signs of slowing. Their fierce reputation had spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and many species watched from the sidelines with a mix of awe and dread. The Valari, once desperate for help, now questioned whether they had invited salvation or doom. The humans who had answered their call were unlike any allies they had ever known. They fought not for glory or honor, but because war was their nature and instinct, carved deep into their very being. Rika Stone, the silent leader of the Deathworlders, carried the weight of countless battles in her eyes. She and her warriors operated with a cold precision that unsettled even the most hardened veterans. Where others saw chaos, they found opportunity. Where others feared pain, they embraced it. To the Death Worlders, the galaxy was a brutal place, where only the strongest survived, and they intended to prove it once and for all. Meanwhile, whispers of Earth's secret programs spread through clandestine networks. Project Fury Protocol was no longer just a rumor. It was a dark truth revealed, created to forge warriors who could endure and dominate in any environment. These Death Worlders were the product of human desperation and survival instinct. Their enhancements went beyond physical strength. They were trained to harness fear, to use pain as a weapon, and to fight with relentless fury. The galaxy began to understand why Earth had kept them hidden. They were too dangerous, too unpredictable for conventional war. Their presence was a reminder of humanity's capacity for violence, a glimpse into a side of Earth few wanted to acknowledge. Yet now they were unleashed, roaming free across the stars with no master but their own unyielding will, the Zorvith Dominion. Once confident in their supremacy, grew desperate. Conventional tactics failed against the Death Worlders' brutal efficiency. Their warships were destroyed, their soldiers hunted like prey. In response, the Zorvith began to resort to subterfuge and dark tactics, hoping to outwit their relentless foes. False peace talks, psychological attacks, and deadly traps littered the battlefield.
Ow.
But the Death Worlders met every challenge head-on, walking knowingly into ambushes and turning the enemy's fear against them. As the war escalated, other alien empires grew, curious and fearful. Some sent envoys to Earth, seeking to understand or even control the Death Worlders. Offers were made, deals proposed. But Earth's message was clear and uncompromising. The Death Worlders were not weapons to be bought or sold. They answered only to themselves, and any attempt to command them would end in ruin. The Death Worlders themselves showed little interest in politics or power. Their mission was singular: to end the war and punish those who had wrought destruction. Mercy was not part of their nature. They fought with a fury born from Earth's harshest trials, and their enemies learned quickly that surrender was meaningless. The Volari, torn between gratitude and fear, urged for peace as the war approached its climax. But Rika Stone stood firm. "We do not fight for peace," she declared. "We fight to end pain. We fight to make the galaxy remember that war has a price." When the Death Worlders finally descended on the Zorvith homeworld, it was with unstoppable force. 6 humans moved like shadows through enemy lines, their strikes swift and deadly. In mere hours, the planet fell silent. The war was over, not with a roar, but with a whisper of death. The Volari sent word back to Earth. The Death Worlders had disappeared, leaving only silence behind. Across the galaxy, fear and respect mingled in the wake of their passage. New legend was born, one that warned all who might call for help to be careful what answered. Earth returned to its quiet vigil, secrets hidden beneath layers of steel and silence. The Death Worlders were gone, but their fury lingered in the memory of stars. The galaxy had learned a harsh truth: mercy was not guaranteed. Sometimes salvation came wrapped in fury, and sometimes that fury was the last thing anyone ever saw. The final approach toward the heart of the Zorvith Dominion was not marked by fanfare or grand battle formations. Instead, it was 6 shadows slipping silently through the darkness of space, each a living weapon honed by Earth's brutal past. These 6 Death Worlders, led by Rika Stone, carried the weight of countless battles and the unyielding purpose of final reckoning. Their mission was clear: end the war and erase the threat that had haunted the Volari and many others as they infiltrated. The Zorvith homeworld, the Death Worlders, moved with terrifying grace. Each step was deliberate, each strike swift and merciless. Their enemies, caught off guard by the absence of massive fleets and overwhelming forces, scrambled to mount a defense. But against these humans, trained to survive the deadliest environments and forged in the crucible of relentless war, the Zorvith had no chance. Walls that once stood as symbols of power fell beneath blades and gunfire. Communications were silenced, and hope evaporated. In the cities, the population vanished as the Death Worlders swept through like a storm of vengeance. No prisoners were taken. No mercy was shown. The people who had once conquered worlds found themselves hunted by an enemy they could neither understand nor defeat. The Death Worlders operated not out of hatred but out of a cold, calculated fury that left devastation in their wake. They fought not to conquer but to extinguish, erasing the darkness that had spread through the galaxy. The Valari, watching from afar, felt a mixture of relief and horror. Their enemy was being destroyed, but the cost was unlike anything they had imagined. The humans who had come to their aid were not heroes. They were forces of nature, unleashed without restraint. As the battle reached its peak, the final strike came, a coordinated assault that shattered the last defenses. The Zorvith homeworld fell into silence. Hours later, the Death Worlders vanished. No messages, no celebrations, only a cold echoing. Quiet. The Valari sent a simple message to Earth. The Death Worlders had completed their mission and disappeared without a trace. Across the galaxy, whispers spread of the terrifying warriors who answered a desperate call and left behind nothing but ashes and fear. The legend grew, carried on the winds of space, a warning to all who might cry for help. Beware the answer you receive, for sometimes salvation wears a mask of fury and destruction. Earth, silent and distant, returned to its watch, hiding secrets beneath layers of steel and shadow. The Death Worlders were gone for now, but their fury lingered in the silence. Deep within Earth's hidden vaults, a single red light flickered once more. The galaxy had learned a harsh truth. Mercy was no longer guaranteed. Sometimes the fury unleashed by a desperate plea was the last thing anyone ever saw. The galaxy was silent after the storm. The Zorvith homeworld lay in ruin, its once proud. Towers crumbled and smoldering. The Valari breathed a cautious sigh of relief, but beneath their gratitude lay a growing unease. The humans, the Death Worlders, had vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared, leaving behind only ashes and whispers. What kind of force answered their desperate call? What had they truly unleashed? Back on Earth, deep beneath layers of concrete and steel, the Death Worlders rested in shadowed chambers. They were warriors born of pain, survival, and fury forged. In the darkest corners of Earth's secret history, their mission was complete, but their existence was a secret locked away from the galaxy's eyes. For now, they faded into silence, waiting for the next call. The next spark of desperation, across the stars, alliances shifted. The galaxy no longer saw Earth as just a rising power, but as a wild card, a planet harboring forces too dangerous to control. Some called for caution, others prepared for war. The Death Worlders' legacy had changed everything. Diplomacy gave way to fear. Hope turned to vigilance. And through it all, one lesson echoed in every system. When you call for help, be wary of what arrives. The Valari tried to rebuild, their world scarred but alive. They remembered the humans with a mixture of respect and dread. The Death Worlders had saved them from annihilation, but at a cost they could not fully understand. Galaxy's future was uncertain, shadowed by the knowledge that mercy was no longer a guarantee. Sometimes salvation came wrapped in fury, and that fury was the last thing anyone ever saw, deep in Earth's vaults. A red light flickered, a silent sentinel in the darkness. The Death Worlders waited, shadows in the cold, ready for the next desperate call. The galaxy had learned a bitter truth. Some forces, once unleashed, could never be controlled, and some calls for help might bring not salvation but total destruction.